everyone who has made the time to catch up with me over the last few weeks. It has been brilliant, and it is certainly nice weather down here in Canberra. Now, for those of you using Barracuda firewalls, please be noted that there has been a critical alert notified to the public this morning. If you do happen to have one of these devices in ESG, please make sure you check out the vulnerabilities and the remediation that has been put out from Barracuda on those devices. Now, really appreciate you sending all the questions through the last few weeks. And I know that you have had quite a number of ones around cyber insurance. What is it? What's it do? What am I going to get covered for? I'm not a specialist in this, so in so doing, I have brought on the amazing Sam. Sam will be joining me right now to answer these questions. Thanks for joining me today. Sam, how are you?
Very well, Kristof. Thanks for having me.
Mate, I appreciate it. This is not my realm of expertise. I don't profess to know anything about insurance. I profess to know more about technology. My friend, this is why I brought you on. Now, as we've discussed, there have been quite a number of questions over the last few weeks, mostly around what is it? So first things, let's start with the basics. Cyber insurance, what is it?
Yeah, so cyber insurance in a nutshell is split into three sections. So there's three types of coverage under a cyber insurance policy. The first is cover for what's called first party costs, which is ultimately the costs a business incurs as a result of a cyber incident or a data breach. So engaging consultants, getting systems back up and running and so on. So that's the first section. Second section of a cyber insurance policy is the business interruption section. So if your systems are down, and as a result, you incur costs or lose income, that's business interruption, and a cyber insurance policy can cover that. And the third section, importantly, is the liability component. So if, as a result of a data breach, you are sued for, say, losing sensitive information, the policy will respond and cover you for your legal expenses and for any liability you incur. So they're the three main sections. The fourth one is often an optional and often an expensive optional relative to the others, especially for small business cyber insurance, and that is crime and social engineering. And that is where ultimately you either have funds stolen by a third party through IT, or alternatively, whether you are defrauded into willingly giving funds away to someone other who you intended to do that to.
I mean, we've unfortunately heard a number of scenarios where ransoms, for example, have come to light. Does that cover that under the fourth optional policy option there?
Sorry, I just had an IT. I only got part of that. I heard you say ransom, and then it cut out. So I was concerned something happened.
We'll call in the cyber gurus. So with that, I mean, we've obviously seen people getting ransomed. So what is it that they need to concern themselves with a policy in regards to that? Is that the fourth option you just spoke about?
So I think I got that. Look, with a ransomware attack and then a ransom demand, different policies will deal with that in different ways. You know, one of the biggest benefits of a cyber insurance policy, in my view, certainly for smaller businesses that don't have their own, robust in-house IT and so on, is that there's a phone number you can call 24/7 if you incur a data breach or suffer an incident, and instantly you're connected with an expert that can help you through the initial response. So first step is they'll guide you through how to manage the incident, and if there is a ransom demand, they'll talk you through how to do that. In terms of how insurance policies respond, it does vary. The official position, the government position in Australia is shouldn't pay ransoms. The reality is some insurance policies will allow and will provision for the payment of ransoms. They'll also provide support through their experts and incident response teams in terms of how to communicate with and negotiate with any potential cyber criminals.
So that brings me to an interesting point. I mean, what does a basic cyber insurance cover? I mean, we hear all about this, but we don't understand it necessarily. Tell me a bit more about it.
Yeah, so in terms of what it covers, it'll cover, so you log on in the morning, can't access the system. There's a nasty message there saying that everything's locked up and all the data's been stolen. So in the first instance, it's a phone call. That number should ideally not be on your system. It should be in your phone. And then you would be talked through initial response. So there'd be questions asked in terms of what you can access, what you can't, and then they'll talk you through how to manage that process. All of those costs would be covered by the policy. Moving forward, reinstatement of systems, IT, forensic review, post-incident and so on, that would all be covered generally under a policy. And when I say all be covered, this is obviously general advice and subject to terms and conditions and so on, which I have to do. That was a concise
nice disclaimer there. Well played.
Thank you. And then if we move forward a week or two or so on and so forth, if there's a material disruption to the business and as a result, the business loses income, easiest example is if you're a 100% online retailer and your website is down for a sustained period, you will lose sales, and the lost sales would be covered under the policy. And then if additionally sensitive information was stolen, you had customers that suffered identity theft, for example, and incurred costs, and those customers sought to recover those costs from you and hold you liable, the policy would respond to that as well. And there was some, there's a lot of statistics. If you go searching for cyber crime statistics online, you'll get flooded with numbers and lots of zeros. One, the Australian Cybersecurity Centre's annual report for the period ended June 2022 had an average cost of cybercrime of just under $40,000 for businesses of up to 20 employees.
Do you know what? That brings me into an interesting point, right? And a divergent on this conversation, because we hear that about the big organisations being, victims of breaches, and they're obviously more publicly announced. But as you mentioned, the Australian Cybersecurity Council and the Australian Signals Directorate have published that report. And one of the scariest factors is that there is a breach every 7 minutes. 7. Was 10, it's now down to 7. I would suggest that this likely coming year, you'll probably see that statistic coming down. Small businesses account for a large amount of those. So what is it? I mean, tell me, why would a small organisation take the view that they don't need cyber insurance, whereas the larger organisations are already doing it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's a lot of people think it's always more targeted than sometimes it is. I think the big difference between small business, and this is supported by claim statistics and all the rest of it, and frankly common sense, is larger businesses have the budgets, generally speaking, to invest in cybersecurity and cyber risk management. Smaller businesses may have that, but often don't invest as much and may be reliant upon external providers or one external provider with sort of the smaller end of that small business range. And so their cybersecurity positions and their cyber risk management profile is not as sophisticated as the larger organizations. So it's an easier target. Small business is an easier target, and that's often, it often boils down to that in terms of why they're exposed.
And that brings me to a very important conversation point here, right? Is cyber insurance expensive? Full stop. And what does it look like on a scale?
Yeah, so it's so the word expensive is deliberately vague, I guess, because it's different. People will consider expensive as different things, but a small business can get cyber insurance. If we're talking an industry segment that's not deemed high hazard, and we're talking the smallest businesses, you're talking premiums from as low as under $1,000 annually.
Affordable?
Sorry, yeah. Look, and I think if you compare the cost with other insurance policies, it's not out of kilter. Obviously, as businesses get bigger, the premiums generally increase, and also there are many factors that can impact premium. So if you're looking at a basic level of coverage, and a lot of small businesses, frankly, if they're looking to manage budget, should look at cyber insurance from the perspective of not, I want every nice to have coverage I can get, but more what would be the scenario or the circumstance that occurs that's going to jeopardize the viability of this business, that will impact our ability to trade, that will cause a catastrophic financial loss, and look to structure cover to protect against that.
Okay, then that takes us to the next step, right? I mean, we've talked about the fact that it is reasonably affordable. Is it something that's easy to obtain, cyber insurance, though?
So again, it's I'd say relatively easy to obtain, provided there are certain basics.
Okay.
So most small businesses have numerous options available to them, generally via insurance brokers, to get cyber insurance. Once they grow, the underwriting process becomes a lot more involved. And there's an expectation that as businesses grow, that they're going to invest more and more in cybersecurity. But for small businesses, there are some basics that they can do that will put them in a position where they should be able to obtain cyber insurance.
Let's take this one step further. Okay, so we've talked about small, medium businesses probably being the most vulnerable in the fact that they are easily affordable, but also need certain protocols in place. And we've talked about the Australian Signals Directorate and ASCCES, putting out the essential 8 categories for businesses to prepare themselves for what we would call passive defense against cyber threats. Tell me, what of those elements would be of benefit to be applied to an organisation to bring their premiums down?
Yeah, so the key, the big ticket items that in many cases don't actually cost too much, that we see as having a material impact on an organisation's cyber risk profile, would be enabling multi-factor authentication on accessing, any work systems, emails, remote access in particular, and so on.
Can I give a statistic on that, Sam, just quickly?
Go for it, yeah.
Only 33 to 34% of organisations in Australia have multi-factor turned on. It's a scary fact. Leaving 65% of the organisations out there vulnerable. And it is a proven fact that over 90%, this is a Microsoft statistics, of threats have been stopped by applying multi-factor authentication.
Well, there you go.
So
that supports why insurers think it's so important as well, because often these requirements are driven from claims. So it's just a function of the insurance industry that, yes, there's a lot of prevention and there's a lot of forecasting and so on, but a significant aspect of an underwriting process does reflect an organization's and insurer's prior loss experience. So multi-factor authentication is a big one. Having up-to-date antivirus software, ensuring that you're running software on your business is running software that is supported, and that software is regularly patched. You're updating that software. If software isn't supported, look at ways or options to move away from that software. Have an incident response plan in place for a ransomware attack, and try to go beyond, I'd just call the IT guy, because whilst that could, but whilst that's, and I think, ASC's, I'm not talking about ASC when I say just the IT guy, but what I mean by that is a lot of the smaller businesses will have an IT contractor that they use. It's usually a business hours type arrangement, and so on. So, unfortunately, the worst loss is going to happen at 10 p.m. at night, or as you're boarding a flight, or it's going to happen at an inconvenient time. So have a plan in place. Cyber insurance can help with that because, as I say, you automatically have access 24/7 to an incident response team. And for those businesses that have, larger IT systems, infrastructure, and so on, maybe, regional spread, have a robust plan that's tested and that's communicated. Awareness is a huge defense. So insurers do like seeing that there's a culture of cybersecurity awareness within an organization, and that that looks like regular training for all employees. I'm sure you've got stats on this as well, but ultimately, a larger number of losses are from people that click on things they shouldn't click on and download things that they shouldn't download. And a lot of that is about regular awareness. Everybody, even people in cyber risk and cyber security, will have weak moments. They're in a rush, they've got a few things going on and so on. Whereas if it's always front of mind, it's a lot more of a defense. Again, a big source of claims is social engineering, which is ultimately where you're defrauded or tricked into transferring funds, for example, or diverging information to a third party that isn't who you think it is. So in terms of the funds piece, the theft piece, have a callback procedure.
Yeah,
we often get in business emails saying, please note our change in bank details. As a minimum, there should be a policy there to call the relevant customer, supplier, and say, just checking, is this legitimate? Have you changed your bank details? And a big one, and this has caused claims and some businesses have been exposed, is don't call back on the number on that email.
Correct.
Because the more sophisticated scams will have someone on the other end of that phone that would just say, yep, that's all fine. So
Thanks,
always
Sam.
call back. Yeah, exactly. So always call back. And then the other one I'd mention, there's a few, but the other one I'd mention is have regular backups and try to have those backups remote, so separate to your operating system or in the cloud.
Brilliant. Yeah, look, I mean, there's some very vital points around that. So, we talked about social engineering. Password hygiene is part of that. Okay, so if you want a free top 10 tips on what you need to do about personal hygiene for your passwords, please comment below. I'll send you the list. It certainly makes a difference, as you said, because if you have got your email address, for example, compromised, people can intercept that, right? And in your conversation we've talked about, they can therefore emulate you as a corporate user or as a financial user, for example, and then start to social engineer conversations to transfer funds. So it's a very vital point. MFA, seriously important. Backups, we can't talk about that enough, right? The cloud air gapped, as they're called, backups, meaning they can't be encrypted post, if someone hits a ransomware, is so vital to recovery. In fact, a great backup system can mean that systems up to 83% of organizations can recover within a day. So that is vital. Rena, thank you so much. Hi, great to see you. So on your final wrap up there, Sam, I mean, give us your final thoughts on what is it that cyber insurance can do for a business and how do you get prepared?
Yeah, so look, I mean, final thoughts are, I'm not here to say everyone needs to buy the insurance, but as with any other insurance policy, the advice is always that if you're not going to take the insurance out, make it a conscious decision. And that means understand what the exposure is, think about what could happen, think about your internal risk controls. And if you need a hand in that space, because we're not all cybersecurity technical specialists, and I include myself in that category, talk to the likes of ASC and others to get an independent view, and then make a decision about whether cyber insurance would assist in protecting your business's revenue stream and assets and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, data is the most critical asset an organization has. If you'd like a cyber assurance assessment, by all, reach out to the team at Pradhan. Sam's details will be on the link above. Feel free to comment below. We will get back to you. If you'd like an independent cyber review, by all means, reach out and comment to myself. More than happy to provide small to medium organizations with that independent view. And that way we can try and be a bit more cyber aware. We've talked about self-defense, about awareness within the organization, passive defense using cybersecurity frameworks, active defense. If you have the funds to do so, please invest in tools and systems that will actually actively look for any threats. So thank you again, Sam. That is brilliant insights. And I know that has answered a number of the questions that we've had recently around cyber insurance. Thank you again for joining us on the stream today, everyone. Also, and your comments below, we will answer them very soon. And until next week, as I like to say, think before you click, because the boogeyman is out there. Have a fantastic weekend, and thanks again for joining me, Sam.
Thanks, Kristof. Enjoy your Friday in Canberra.